It's been a while since I made a new video. A couple of good reasons for that. One was I was pretty busy flying full scale, and we were on some vacations out of the country, so it's been a busy summer, and actually I didn't get nearly as much scale flying in as I really wanted to do. So other thing is, I couldn't really think of anything interesting that might be worth your time to watch. So I thought I would kind of wrap up the summer here with some stories about repairs. And the first one I'm going to talk about is this big yellow T28, the 2-meter Eflite T28. This is the ESC that came with the T28. It is an Avian Light 70 amp ESC. I've got these in a lot of models over there, similar if not identical, and they've all worked pretty well. But on the last day I was flying out at my Danville, Indiana club, the motor quit. And I was pretty low. In fact, I was coming in for a landing. I had the gear down, and she went into the weeds and broke the nose gear. Had to get a new nose gear, broke the cowling, and sheared the fuselage off right behind the firewall. Had a few little dents in the wings, but nothing on the tail. It was actually going pretty slow when it hit, but couldn't get the nose up in time, and it came in some pretty tall weeds. Luckily, it quit when it did, because if it hadn't, I'd have gone into the trees, and that would have been a disaster. So I'm going to go get the camera and show you what I put in to replace this with. And by the way, I did verify that it was just the motor. Or not the motor, just the ESC. I had another ESC around here similar to this with a EC5 connector, put it in there and the motor ran just fine. And the controls worked. BEC is fine in it too, and BEC works on this one, but it won't power the motor up. So let's take a look at what I put in to replace this one. So here we are. I'll have to fasten that in a little better. That's an 80 amp Avian with a cooling fan. And it even has 2 power leads, so you can hook up 2 batteries to it, which I don't really plan to do. Probably a 7,000 is as big as I'm going to put in this one. And down here, you can see the damage. It actually went back together pretty well, considering that nose came completely off. So it took a new prop, a new cowling, some glue, and a new nose wheel assembly. Total cost was about $60, $70, I think, to get it back. Plus the ESC was about $100. So that was the last wreck of the year, but unfortunately not the only one. Let's talk about the Beaver I've got over there and the Twin Timber incidents that I had, actually both on the same day, and what I had to do to fix those. Part 2. I was flying at a lake at the Beaver and the Twin Timber on floats. And apparently my depth perception isn't the greatest in the world, because I managed to get both of these airplanes into a tree. Trying to make a high-speed pass, and I thought I was plenty close enough, and I wasn't. There's nothing like that feeling when you think you're on top of a tree or past a tree and you aren't, and the airplane suddenly disappears. Almost got one of them to climb above the tree, but it still managed to hit the tree. Anyway, In both cases, kind of strange. The floats were okay, the fuselage and tail was okay, but the wings were in pretty bad shape. So I ordered 2 wing sets. You got this much money in the hobby, what's a couple $100 more? And what I want to talk about is the difference between how easy it is to replace these wings on an Eflite airplane versus an FMS airplane. And I got to tell you, the FMS was significantly more difficult. First, let's do the Eflite. Here's the Eflite Twin Timber wing. To replace this wing, all you're going to need to do is take the motor mount and the cowling and the motor off of the front of the wing. And of course, you got to take the prop off too. And the wiring here already comes with the wing, ESC wiring for the motor and the control wiring and the light on the end. All those wires are here. And then you have to pop these covers off the back or bottom of the wing and move the servos over. They even give you new linkages to go with this. The whole process takes maybe 15-20 minutes per wing. And I should probably say that this video only applies to these 2 airplanes. Haven't had a lot of experience with replacing wings on either Eflite or FMS, but very simple, straightforward process. The nice thing is all the wiring's done for you. The servo leads are plenty long enough. They're just buried in here. You have to pull them out a little ways, plug in the servo. There's a lot of room under here to stuff in the extra wiring. You glue the servos in. Oh no, I'm sorry, on this one there are brackets. There's 3 screws that hold the servo in, and then glue this plastic cover back on top. Piece of cake, right? This is the wing off the Beaver. It was a lot more trouble to replace. The main reason being that this wing is put together in 2 pieces, a bottom half and a top half. And they had to do that in order to fish the wiring leads out to the lights. I did manage to get the servo leads fished through, but these lights require that you cut slits in the foam because you can't pull those leads back through with anything. Normally what you would do is attach, say, a piece of string to the end of the leads that plug in here on the wing and pull that back through, and then pull your new servo lead back through. But that's not going to work here because these lights that have to be moved over, those leads just do not pull out at all. And I found out trying to fish the leads through from this end and then pulling back, that didn't work either. So underneath this decal, there is a slit cutting that wing all the way back to the tip. And you can see right here, I had to cut a slit there. You can see the wire actually exposed a little bit here. And then feed that wire into that slit to get it down here where I could plug it in to this plug right here that fits on the wing. So I took a picture of this, by the way, before I took it apart, so I'd know which plug lead went to which side of the plug here. This is just a custom-made plug. It's really very convenient. But this took about 1 hour per wing, maybe more, because to get these wires out of this wing, I actually had to break the wing into 2 or 3 pieces to get that wire out, or wires. Versus, and by the way, this wing set was about $15 more than the Eflite set, which, as I showed you, extremely convenient. The wires are already here. All you have to do is move that motor over and the servos over, and you're done. 30 minutes tops. Of course, then you got to go center up the servos and all that stuff, and make sure the motor turns in the right direction, yada yada yada. It's going to turn in the right direction because these are color coded under here. Where the motor goes, you have the standard colors, and they do work properly. Okay, well, we'll find out. Oh, by the way, the FMS also doesn't come with these attached, these stall fences, and you have to move the strut over too as well. But anyway, I just found this was extremely labor intensive, and relative to the Eflite wing, rather expensive to replace. Okay, let's see, what else have we got? Yeah, one or two more. Yes, the Super Timber. There have been a lot of complaints on YouTube about the fragility of the landing gear on this airplane. And what people have seen is that not all of them are coming from the factory with this plastic plate that the gear is mounted on properly glued in, apparently. But even if it is properly glued in, what I have found is that if you try what I did, which had the airplane coming back straight at me and it was downwind, and I let it get a little bit too slow and it stalled about 3 feet off the ground and landed on one gear. It did not break this off, but it did spring it. I could have gone on and flown it if I'd made good landings with it sprung a little bit, but I elected to quit and come back to the shop and get a hot glue gun and put a lot of hot glue on it. And it seems to have been working just fine ever since. There is another weakness, and that is where these screws go through these wire rods, 2 of them on each side. Those screws go through that rod, and that creates a weak point in the rod. It shouldn't be too bad though, because you've got the springs here that help insulate those rods from bending. But I suppose it is possible to hit hard enough to break off one of those rods. In fact, it happened to one of the guys out at my flying field, and I went home and immediately ordered a new landing gear set, just in case. You never know how long these things are going to be in stock or how long the parts are going to be available. So my practice is, and I've got a whole bunch of parts down in a drawer here on the desk, that I've got extra props, I've got extra landing gear springs, and a few other things, particularly for my Cessna 150, because they don't make that one anymore, that nose wheel version. So anyway, yeah, there have been a lot of complaints about this landing gear popping off completely. I haven't experienced that yet. Maybe I will, but my observation is if it was put on correctly at the factory, you're going to see it be pretty sturdy. That landing I had was really hard, and it didn't even break it all the way off. Otherwise, this airplane has been a joy to fly. I love it. Plenty of power, lots of vertical, good roll rate, and I don't even have the flaps hooked up to the ailerons. I don't have the flaperons on here. If I did, that roll rate would be outstanding. That may be a project over the winter. Okay, the last thing for this series is going to be how to balance the 3-meter Fox propeller. And you can do it. Most of the time, you can't balance these folding props. And as this one comes from the factory, you can't do it either, because the factory setup, there are these pins held on by those little retainer clips, and you can't tighten them up. Well, what I've done is substituted bolts and nuts for those retainer clips. And let me show you what happens if you tighten them up a little bit. Using that hex wrench right there, oops, let me get out of the way here, there. Using this hex wrench, I tighten those bolts up just maybe a 1/16 of a turn. And once you tighten them up, the prop doesn't flop anymore. So, the next step is to mount this on our prop balancer. When you try to balance a folding prop, it's really important to have the blades set at the same angle relative to each other. This is an exaggerated version of what happens if you don't do that. Now that prop is not balanced, obviously. There's more moment in that lower blade than there is in the upper blade when it comes to gravity. So let's try to straighten that up a little bit. Let's see what happens now. Probably still don't have it exactly right. Let's take a look here. There. I balanced it this way and put it back on the airframe and ran it up. Boy, does it ever run smooth. I still don't have it quite exactly right. So I'm going to stop here and put this thing down on the bench and get those blades totally aligned with each other. Here's how you do that. You set the blades, or set the, in this case, the hub down, and then move those blades so that they're exactly the same angle to that hub. And then you put it back on the balancer, being very careful not to let those blades move in their mounts. Okay, let's look at this again. It's almost impossible to get one of these things perfectly balanced. Let's see how good it is, though. Round and round she goes. It won't be perfect, but I can tell you when you put it on the model, it really does work very nicely. Yep. So you can see, not too bad. I just had to shave a little off the back side of one of the blades to get it absolutely perfectly balanced. It's probably the best balanced prop in the whole fleet right now, as a matter of fact. So, I think I'll call it quits here. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great winter. And look forward, I think, getting back to flying this spring, or maybe we'll have a good day. Who knows?